Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're drifting far from the safety of Crete, into the vast, indifferent waters of the Bronze Age Aegean, where a single sailor can vanish without the sea even noticing. You're not a hero or a legend, just an ordinary Minoan crewman carried farther than you ever meant to go. Before we start, do me one small favour. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. If you'd prefer these stories without ads, you can join the Patreon. It's linked in the description. And if you want the ultimate immersive experience, consider using a pair of wireless earbuds. They're comfortable, discreet, and designed so you can wear them even while sleeping. I've linked my favourite pair, plus other sleep tools, in the description. Now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. You drift awake to the soft tremor of wood, shifting beneath your spine. The Minoan ship breathes in long, patient intervals, its planks swelling and relaxing as the first strands of dawn settle over the Aegean. You lie still for a moment, letting the faint roll of the water cradle you the way an aging storyteller cradles a half-forgotten tale. The air is cool enough to remind you that night has only just withdrawn, leaving behind a faint taste of salt and something older that has no name. You inhale deeply, feeling the texture of the sea enter your lungs in thin, measured sips. The sky above you is a pale gold, the kind that arrives unintentionally, as though dawn simply misplaced its brightness and let it spill across the horizon. You watch as the light nudges the waves, revealing their slow, deliberate pulse. Nothing about the sea's movement seems rushed. It shifts with the unbothered confidence of a witness who has seen more human ambition than any one person can carry. You can almost sense it watching you, not with emotion, but with that quiet, unblinking awareness that belongs only to ancient things. The ship gives a gentle groan, a sound like an elderly relative rising from a long chair. You know the vessel is well built, the work of artisans who believed wood responded to kindness if handled correctly. Even now, as small currents press against its sides, you hear no panic in its structure. Only endurance, only the steady insistence of something meant to last longer than the people who guide it. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb the calm settling across the deck. Your limbs feel heavy but functional, as though they have been loaned to you by a more capable version of yourself. A thin mist hugs the sea around you, softening the lines between water and air. It gives everything the appearance of having faded slightly overnight. The ropes, the mast, the rows of tightly fitted planks all seem drawn in gentler strokes than you remember. A gull circles overhead, its cry brief and disinterested. You watch it glide away, wings cutting across the new light. Birds have the luxury of distance. They leave behind no trails, no obligations, no memories tied to clay jars or incense, or the judgment of those who claim to understand. The will of the gods. You envy the bird not for its freedom, but for its uncomplicated relationship with the world. It asks for nothing more than wind and a suitable place to land. Your hands rest on the deck beside you. The wood is cool and slightly damp, carrying the faint grit of dried salt. It feels sturdier than your thoughts, which slide in and out of coherence like loose knots. You run your fingers along the grain, tracing the marks left by tools and time. Each ridge tells a story of someone who laboured with the hope that their craftsmanship might protect sailors far beyond their own lifetime. That kind of hope has always seemed both admirable and naive to you. Admirable because it aims to be useful, naive because the sea has never made promises. As you rise, your joints whisper their complaints. You stretch, letting the stiffness melt into the morning air. The horizon lies unbroken in every direction, a continuous ring of blue that pretends to be infinite. You know better. Nothing is infinite, not even the sea. It only pretends long enough for people to believe it. The pretense is enough to shape entire civilizations, inspire shrines, and drive young sailors to pray for protection they suspect they have not earned. You walk to the edge of the deck, balancing easily on the familiar wood. The sea below sways with a kind of indifferent grace. Its surface is flecked with small crests of foam, each one sparkling faintly as the sun lifts higher. The rhythm is hypnotic. You watch one crest form, expand and dissolve, then another and another. The repetition is soothing, though a small part of you notices how effortlessly each wave replaces the last. You realize how simple it is for the world to move on without remembering names. You dip your hand into the water as the ship tilts, letting the coolness wrap around your fingers. The sea touches you without acknowledgement, the way an elderly scholar might brush past a young apprentice without registering their presence. There is no malice in the gesture, only a well-practiced neutrality. You feel oddly comforted by the lack of attention. For once, you are not required to impress anything. A faint breeze moves through your hair, carrying with it the scent of distant herbs from an island you cannot see. You know the smell by heart: thyme crushed beneath sandals, fennel traded in jars, laurel leaves burned in temples where priests speak with the certainty of men who cannot imagine being wrong. The scent arrives as if carried by memory rather than wind. It reminds you of mornings when you stood on harbour sides, watching ships depart. Men always looked braver when seen from shore. You turn your gaze upward. The light has grown warmer, coaxing subtle shades of orange from the clouds that linger to the west. They drift in long-stretched formations, as though pulled by the invisible hands of quiet gods. The colours do not shout their presence. They fade gradually into one another with the gentle logic of natural things. You take a long, steady breath, feeling the warmth settle across your chest. Your attention drifts to the mast, where the sail hangs in soft folds. The fabric is worn but dependable, its edges marked by faint frays that speak of long voyages. You know every line of it, every repair made by hands steadier than yours. There is comfort in familiarity, even when it belongs to something as indifferent as a sail. You reach out and touch it lightly. The texture is rough, woven from fibres, twisted with the care of people who believed precision could influence fate. A small clay jar rests near the bow, tied securely by rope. You remember placing it there days ago, an offering meant to invite calm waters. The jar's painted spirals seem almost comical now, earnest in their attempt to please forces that do not require decoration. Still, you appreciate the gesture of your past self. People cling to rituals not because they work, but because they offer a momentary illusion of control. You are not immune to such comforts, no matter how skeptical your thoughts may be. The ship shifts slightly as a wave lifts it, then lowers it again. You follow the motion with quiet acceptance. There is nothing to resist. The sea carries you without effort, guiding you farther from home, with the same ease it once carried others away from theirs. You imagine the countless sailors who have vanished into its depths, their stories swallowed without distinction, not out of cruelty, but out of the sea's inability to store more than motion. You close your eyes for a moment. Behind your lids, the light turns red and warm. You sense the pulse of the ocean through the soles of your feet. The movement is steady, almost comforting. It reminds you of breathing, though slower and far older. You let yourself sway with it, allowing the boundary between your body and the ship to blur slightly. For a brief instant, you feel as though you are not standing on the sea, but within it. When you open your eyes again, the world has brightened. The sun climbs with gentle determination, casting soft reflections across the waves. You watch as the patterns shift, creating fleeting shapes that dissolve before your mind can name them. You decide not to name anything this morning. It feels unnecessary. The world seems content without your labels, and you find a certain relief in that. A faint creak from the helm reminds you that the ship has preferences of its own. It angles slightly to the east, nudged by currents you cannot fully predict. You accept the change in direction without concern. The sea has never followed human maps. The earlier you learn to follow its logic, the less energy you waste resisting it. You breathe in once more, slower this time. The air tastes of light and salt and something faintly metallic. You let it fill your lungs until your chest expands with a gentle ache. The sensation grounds you in a way that prayer never has. You feel the weight of your body, the stability of the deck, the endless motion beneath it. Everything is in place, even if none of it feels secure. You place your hand on the railing, feeling the grain press lightly against your palm. You watch the water slip by in shades of blue that shift with every passing moment. A quiet understanding settles over you. The sea does not care whether you are ready for the day. It moves at its own pace, following rhythms established long before anyone carved a shrine or lit a ceremonial lamp. This realization does not frighten you. It eases something in your chest, unlocking a breath you did not realize you were holding. You gaze out over the horizon one last time. The line between sky and water seems more blurred now, softened by the haze of morning light. You sense the day stretching ahead, not as a series of events, but as a long, unbroken flow. You feel the gentle insistence of the sea beneath you, guiding you forward with its old, indifferent patience. You stand quietly, letting the moment settle around you. The ship creaks again, the water sighs, and the light spreads farther across the waves. You feel small within it all, but not diminished, only placed correctly, as though the world has finally arranged you where you belong. The sea remembers many things. Whether it remembers you is uncertain, but as the ship glides across the morning water, you sense that your presence, however brief, is already woven lightly into its endless motion. You carry the quiet of the sea inside you, like a small stubborn stone. It sits beneath your ribs, a steady weight that rattles only when tides or memory push against it. The harbour where you began that weight felt different then, not heavier, only fuller, crowded with the small sounds of people who thought the world could be bargained with. You remember it as if from behind glass, each detail softened by the distance between you and the place you once walked. Morning in that port was a layered thing. First came the scent, olive oil warming in clay, amphora, figs too ripe and sweet, resin smoke from newly tarred ropes, and beneath it all, the inexorable salt smell that seems to collect where sea and settlement meet. You can still taste the mingled flavours on your tongue, the faint bitterness of olive, the sugary stick of fig, the tang of fish scales rinsed in buckets. The air there had texture. It sat on your skin like a fine shawl, and you learned to fold yourself into it as naturally as you folded sails. You walked with others who were moving with purpose but not haste. The port was arranged with the practical modesty of people who placed value in order. Stone quays rose from dark water, polished by the passage of countless sandals. Wooden jetties extended like the fingers of some careful hand, their planks warm from earlier sun. Storehouses stood in rows behind low walls. Their doors were half open, revealing ranks of jars, amphorae lined like sentinels, painted with spirals and dolphins, and the same looping symbols that adults spoke of as if they were language, and as if language could keep out misfortune. The shrines were small, tucked into corners where two streets met. They were no more elaborate than needed. A painted stone, a shallow basin for water, a few faded offerings of shells, and bruised flowers tied with thin cords. People moved around them with a practiced reverence, dropping a grain of barley or an oil-soaked cloth as if that transaction could slow the slow turning of seasons. You played your part in those movements, the way you tied your sandals. Because everyone did it. Because ritual is a heat that keeps a community from falling into the chill of randomness. There was colour everywhere, if you looked through the right patience. Frescoes flaked in the sun, but the pigment still held its stubborn life. Cerulean dolphins arcing across a panel, a procession of figures in curious skirts moving, as if part of some long silent music. Children chased one another between stalls. A dog dozed by a merchant's shadow. tail twitching in dreams of stolen scraps. Voices overlapped, syllables of bargaining, a quiet whisper of prayer, the clack of pottery. All of it formed a domestic chorus that made you believe for a time that whatever the world might throw your way, there would always be a landing place to come back to. You recall brief faces, your mother, an unremarkable woman whose hands smelled perpetually of vinegar and bread, a neighbour who stitched sails and had a laugh you could count on when nights drew long, a priestess who moved with the careful economy of someone who has worn robes for a lifetime. You remember how people bestowed on one another small, private assurances, a loaf left on a step, a knot of rope repaired, a hand on the shoulder. Each act was small enough to be ordinary and therefore more binding than any formal promise. You remember the harbour's commerce in the slow cadence of goods. Amphorae were loaded with oil and wine, their rounded bodies tucked snugly beneath tarpaulins. Baskets of dried fish waited in rows, silver scales glinting like sunlit coins. Sacks of grain were stacked against wooden pillars, humming faintly as air moved through them. Traders, some local, some from further isles, spoke in soft dialects, their languages braided into the marketplace like ropes. You stood among them and listened, learning how far things could travel on a belief in safe passage. There was practicality in the construction of the town. Buildings favoured the sea with low windows and shady courtyards so that summer heat was less aggressive and trade could be watched from a cool step. You loved the tactile ordinariness of it, the warmth of sun on limestone steps, the gritty pull of a rope under palm, the sudden sting of a splinter from a poorly hewn board. The harbour moved to a practical rhythm of loading, selling, blessing, and then boarding. Nothing dramatic, only the steady repetition of people attempting, in small ways, to hold life together. That harbour is not there now, in the way you remember it. The thought of its absence does not burst like a tragedy. It unfurls more like an embroidered cloth gradually unpicked. The key that once accepted the press of ships lies elsewhere now, submerged perhaps, or taken by a coastline that shifted its mind in a single, decisive tremor. Storehouses are ruins beneath layers of silt, or have been reclaimed by the scrub and salt grass that creep into abandoned places. The shrines you once knelt before might be nothing more than rounded stones, waiting for lichen to soften their edges. The paintings that laughed with cerulean motion have likely long since peeled into the dust. You do not arrive at this realization with the dramatic grief of a sudden loss. Instead, you find yourself feeling the odd quiet ache of recognition that the world can rearrange itself without consulting the people who make their plans upon it. The harbour's disappearance reads like an ordinary example of a world that does not prioritize human memory. Nature has its own calendars and currencies. Sea and earth trade positions. The shoreline withdraws or advances. Waves press into places once dry. Soil slides and cradles new shapes. People who built careful calendars of ritual and commerce learned in time that permanence is a matter of fortune, not effort. There is a peculiar solace in this if you're willing to accept it. The harbour's absence speaks to the smallness of all human certainty, which is not a condemnation, but a kind of housekeeper's lesson. You carry that with you when you move across water. Each knot tied, each offering left for the gods, is an accommodation to uncertainty. That harbour, with its busy markets and shrines, was not a guarantee. It was an agreement between people to continue attempting the same small things. Store grain, repair sails, leave flowers, until the fabric of place loosened enough for the sea or a storm to unravel it. You often picture walking away from that quay as the ship began to tilt away from the dock. Your hands felt heavy with the small things you had brought. A strip of cloth from your father's shirt, a clay amulet your mother pressed into your palm, a few coins wrapped in waxed linen. You remember the sound of the gangplank as it lifted and the slight rustle of robes as the priestess, who had known how to command quiet, gave a nod that meant both farewell and approval. There was the ritual touch of bell and offering, people lining the edge for a moment to watch you become part of the moving world. You watched their faces shrink into the geometry of distance, cheeks, chin, eyes turning into the soft, round shapes of memory. It was not heroic. It was only what people do when required to let another person go. You walked the pier with a mind uneasy about consequences, but also habitually accepting of them. You could feel every footstep as if it imprinted itself in the world. The boards creaked beneath your sandals in a pattern you memorized. The ropes that bound the ship to shore chafed against cleats, their fibers already seasoned by salt. You took a breath and stepped onto the deck, feeling the ship tilt to accommodate the new weight. The harbour receded slowly, then with a determination that was not vindictive, only inevitable. You watched the shoreline narrow, like the closing of a hand. Only later, when the sight of the harbour was a small curve of land far behind you, did you imagine the place dissolving into different states. A ruin, a pile of silt, a memory shared among fewer and fewer people. You imagined the sun baking the amphorae into a mosaic of broken jars, their painted spirals, a scattered pattern among the stones. You imagined the shrines reduced to plain rock, then to the sea. These images are not fanciful. They are the quiet arithmetic of time. The things people make do not always outlast the rocks they are built upon. Yet while the harbour's physical form may have changed, its presence lives on in the details you brought with you. The scent of resin in your hair is a fraction of its memory. The practiced motions of tying a knot or sealing an amphora with pitch follow you like a shadow. The small rituals, tossing a pinch of grain into the water, rubbing oil into a mast, are patterns you perform without thinking, as if the harbour itself still instructs your hands. They are the continuity that matters most because they travel with you, compact and portable, even when walls and quays vanish. You stand at the rail now, palms warm from the sun, thinking of that missing harbour. Your reflection shimmers on the water's surface, an indistinct double that moves with you and does not concern itself with permanence. You do not long to return. You only wish, in a muted way, that the people who remained there kept a memory of what you were carrying. More than goods, more than small tokens, but the faint confidence that life could be arranged into habits gentler than fate. The sea takes cities and gives them back as lessons. You have learned to value what travels with you over what is left behind. You feel the harbour's absence not as a loss to be corrected, but as a fact to be accepted, folded into the slow rhythm that guides your hands and your breath. The ship rides the swell like an old understanding between partners, and the day unrolls before you like cloth, unadorned and useful. When the breeze lifts a faint memory of crushed time and tar, you fold it into yourself and go about your small, necessary tasks. You check the lashings, pat the jars, smooth a sail with a practiced hand. The past drifts with you, not like luggage to be unloaded, but like wind caught in a sail, present, shaping motion, and impossible to pin down. You allow the memory of the harbour to settle into your work, rather than into sentiment. It is enough. The ship rolls beneath your feet, and you move with it, carrying a vanished place forward in the soft economy of habit. You move across the deck with the same quiet rhythm the sea has forced upon your body, a rhythm that is neither hurried nor slow but simply inevitable. The memory of the harbour still lingers in you, like dust caught in the crease of a garment, clinging lightly even after distance has thinned it. The ship tilts gently as you shift your weight, and the faint clatter somewhere beneath the planks reminds you of the objects you brought aboard in those last moments before departure. The memory rises not with sharpness, but with the resigned clarity of truth finally allowed to breathe. Those offerings had seemed weightless when you packed them, nothing more than tokens made necessary by custom. A few tiny figurines carved from soft stone, their surfaces smoothed by hands older than yours. A bundle of folded linens, dyed in the muted red, favoured by priests who insisted colour mattered to the divine, and hope, which you somehow thought could be contained like an ordinary item, though it behaved more like smoke, escaping precisely when you wanted it to stay. The figurines rest now in a clay bowl tucked beneath a coil of rope near the bow. You know exactly where they are without needing to look. Their presence announces itself the way certain people do, quietly, but with the kind of persistence that demands recognition. One of them is shaped like a bull, its horns stubby from wear. Another is no more than a faceless human form, its arms raised in a gesture that could be worship or warning, depending on how you frame it. The third is a tiny cup, far too small to hold anything meaningful, yet carefully crafted as though someone once believed it could carry the attention of a god. You crouch near them, letting your fingers brush the rim of the bowl. The clay is cool and rough beneath your touch, the texture carrying the memory of the potter's wheel. You imagine the craftsman working with steady hands, shaping the vessel while murmuring to himself about balance and purpose. Many objects in your world were made this way, quietly, without ceremony, yet destined to become instruments of ritual. Human hands appear to reach instinctively for the sacred when faced with the unmanageable. The sea is certainly unmanageable. Perhaps that is why you packed the bowl. When you lift the bull figurine, it fits into your palm neatly, as if designed for your grip alone. Its weight is substantial enough to remind you of its presence, but too light to anchor anything important. You hold it up to the morning light. The worn stone reflects a muted glow, the kind that reveals shape without revealing truth. You know the priests always insisted that bulls carried strength between the mortal world and the divine. You had never fully believed that claim, but belief was only partly the point. Rituals were not built on truth. They were built on cohesion, on the shared understanding that uncertainty should be met in unison rather than alone. You set the figurine down and unwrap the folded linens. The fabric, though simple, has an almost ceremonial precision to it. The faint scent of myrrh lingers in its fibres, a reminder of the temple chamber where it was placed among offerings waiting for transport. You remember walking past the priestess who handed it to you, her expression measured, as though she wanted to say something but had long since learned that words rarely protect sailors. Instead, she had pressed the cloth into your hands with a nod, trusting the gesture to carry both blessing and resignation. You lift the linens to your face. Their softness surprises you every time. They were meant to be tied to the mast or placed at the prow to catch the favour of deities who supposedly admired tidy offerings. But you kept them folded instead, tucked away with the reverent indecision of someone who wants protection but doubts its conditions. You never quite believed a square of fabric could calm a storm or guide a lost ship back to shore. Yet you brought it across the water because skepticism and ritual often live side by side without quarrel. The ship rocks gently and the figurines clink faintly in their bowl. You listen to the sound with a half smile. The noise is oddly domestic, as if the gods themselves require the comfort of familiar household sounds. The faint irony of the thought settles easily in your mind. People often assign divinity grand roles, judges, guardians, wielders of elements, but then bring them offerings no grander than a small bowl of stone trinkets. Perhaps the gods appreciate modesty, or perhaps they find your gifts as faintly amusing as you do. You sit back on the deck, legs crossed, the breeze lifting strands of your hair. Around you, the sea is calm, its surface gently folding and unfolding, like a page turned by a distracted reader. The sky stretches in pale blue arcs overhead. The quietness here feels different from the quietness of home. Here, silence carries a peculiar honesty. On land, silence often hides something, unspoken fear, concealed anticipation, or simple politeness. At sea, silence has nothing to hide. It simply is. Your eyes drift back to the bowl. You think of the people who insisted these items would protect you. Most of them spoke with the confidence of those who rarely test their beliefs against the edge of the world. You had nodded along because questioning faith in a harbour is like questioning the weight of a stone on dry land. It is easy, theoretical, bloodless. Only when the sea stretches in all directions and the horizon refuses to move does belief reveal its true shape. You pick up the faceless figurine. Its lack of features is somehow more unsettling than any expression. A blank face can carry any meaning. Perhaps that is the point. Perhaps the gods prefer silhouettes so they can project their shifting moods onto them. Or perhaps the artisan simply lacked the skill to carve eyes and found abstraction easier. You study its smooth head, the way its tiny arms rise as though expecting something. Wind, blessing, disaster. It waits patiently, and you wonder if you have been doing the same. Setting it down again, you adjust the linen folds, straightening them reflexively. Order in small things gives the illusion of control over large things. You've noticed sailors do this often, aligning ropes, checking knots repeatedly, smoothing frayed edges of sailcloth. These habits have little effect on weather or fate, yet they create a narrow pocket of order within chaos, a pocket just large enough to breathe. You lean back, letting your spine rest against a crate. The wood presses into your shoulder blades. You feel the ship shifting beneath you, steady and untroubled. The offerings sit before you, arranged neatly. You take in the scene with the detached tenderness of someone examining relics from a childhood belief. The absurdity of it all doesn't offend you. If anything, it comforts you. There is something deeply human about offering small things to incomprehensible forces. It is the one gesture that spans every generation, every culture, every coastline, touched by tides. A faint creak from the mast draws your attention. The linens stir in a soft ripple, as if acknowledging the breeze. You imagine the gods watching through some distant haze, observing your every gesture with either deep contemplation or none at all. Their silence could mean approval, or indifference, or simply the absence of interest. You find that the uncertainty does not trouble you. You have reached a point where outcomes matter less than the quiet ritual of arranging small stones in a bowl and straightening the cloth that bears no magic beyond what you assign it. The ship glides forward. The offerings remain still. You sense a balance in the contrast, the movement of the sea paired with the stillness of ritual objects. One is vast, ancient, and indifferent. The other is tiny, crafted, and earnest. Together they form the peculiar harmony of a sailor's life. Caught between forces too large to influence and habits too small to abandon, you stand slowly, stretching the stiffness from your legs. The bowl stays where it is. The figurines hold their silent poses. You tie the linens into a loose knot at the edge of a beam, letting them flutter just enough to show they are present. Not as a plea, not as a declaration, simply as a reminder of the fragile hope you carried on board, along with supplies and expectations. The sea stirs beneath you, patient and unchanged. You move with it, the offerings behind you faintly clinking as the ship breathes in its slow ancient rhythm. The gods remain silent, but then again, they always have. Their silence is part of the world's architecture. You accept it without argument, stepping into the day with the quiet knowledge that you carry more than provisions. You carry the rituals of your people, the weight of their hopes, and the faint, persistent belief that even absurd gestures can steady a drifting heart. And so you walk across the deck, leaving the figurines to keep their silent watch, their small forms holding the last, familiar echoes of a world that has already begun to fade behind you. You feel the first shift in the air, long before the sky changes. It comes as a faint tightening, the way a woven basket creaks just before it gives under weight. The sea continues its slow rise and fall beneath the hull, but there's a new undertone to the motion, subtle, nearly polite, as if the water is making preparations for something it knows well and feels no need to announce. Your hand rests on the railing, and the wood vibrates beneath your fingertips with a quiet readiness, as though the ship itself has sensed a familiar pattern in the world's breathing. The clouds gather with a softness that makes them almost easy to overlook. They drift in from a direction you haven't been watching, forming layers upon layers of muted grey, each one slipping behind the next with the patience of an archivist sorting through documents no one asked for. Their presence feels less like a threat and more like the return of something you had once forgotten, a visitor who has arrived without ceremony, expecting no greeting and offering none. The light dims slowly, not in a dramatic fade but in a gradual thickening of shadow that folds itself into the edges of your sight. The sea shifts from clear blue to a deeper, more thoughtful colour. You watch the surface stiffen under the weight of the rising wind. Ripples stretch long across the water, pulled in the same direction like strands of hair combed back by an unseen hand. You adjust your stance automatically, feet finding familiar angles, body leaning into the ship's new movements with a practiced instinct you never had to learn consciously. The wind arrives with an odd restraint. It doesn't lash or roar, it exhales. A long, steady breath that rearranges the air around you and nudges the sails with a careful, almost considerate force. The ropes creak in answer. The mast sways with the cautious confidence of something that has survived worse. You pull the linen offering tighter where it hangs, and the fabric twists weakly, as though uncertain whether the gods have been roused by the change in weather. You take in the horizon, now disappearing behind a sheet of pale haze. Nothing about the coming storm feels personal. It doesn't announce itself with the drama of legends. It does not claim revenge or justice or divine instruction. Instead, it moves with the indifference of a presence fulfilling its nature. You feel no malice pressing against your skin, only inevitability. The ship tilts as the first long wave lifts its hull. The movement is deliberate and smooth, like a hand cupping water rather than striking it. You grip the railing and let the motion pass through you, the muscles in your legs adjusting with a slow, practiced intelligence. You've done this before. Every sailor has. No storm arrives as a stranger. They all share the same mild arrogance, unconcerned with your fears, uninterested in your rituals, entirely unfazed by the objects you carry for protection. The wind pushes the vessel gently off its familiar course, not violently, simply insistently, as though guiding you toward a destination that cares nothing for your intentions. You watch the rope at the stern sway in long arcs, the wooden beams groan softly under the shifting strain. The smell in the air changes. The sea's clean salt scent thickens with something metallic, as if the sky itself is preparing to tear open. You adjust the tension of a line out of habit. The rope bites into your palms, its fibers rough and honest. There is no comfort in the task, only the satisfaction of performing something you understand. Storms strip the world of illusions quickly, leaving behind only what your hands can actually touch. Offerings, rituals, whispered prayers, all fall quiet under the weight of weather. The figurines you placed in their bowl do not stir. They simply wait, as silent in turbulence as they are in calm. A low rumble rolls across the water. Not loud, not threatening, just a reminder that the sky too has a body capable of movement. You feel it in your chest rather than hear it with your ears. The vibration settles into your bones like a memory you cannot place. You look upward and watch the clouds thicken, their edges folding into one another until the sky becomes a single, unbroken sheet. The storm shapes itself without hurry. A mist of sea spray reaches the deck in light bursts. You lift your face to it, letting the droplets cool your skin. The sensation is strangely grounding. The storm does not reach for you the way storytellers insist storms do. It does not glare or howl or seize your life with violent intention. It merely expands, stretching its limbs across the sea, following its own choreography. You find a muted respect for its lack of emotion. The ship lifts again, higher this time. The wave beneath you feels larger, but not aggressive, just present. You bend slightly at the knees, allowing your balance to shift. The wind threads itself around your body, pulling at your tunic with fingers that neither grasp nor release. You hear the sail strain, its fabric snapping once in sharp resistance before settling into a tense flutter. Your thoughts drift to the routines of home. Shrines swept each morning, fishermen arguing about the reliability of nets, women elbow-deep in grain, priests insisting storms are messages when storms have always been weather. You imagine them now, perhaps looking up at the same sky, noting its change, muttering predictions that carry more hope than accuracy. They might speak your name into discussions about winds and currents, but the sea does not carry news from one shore to another. It carries only motion. A gust hits the deck with more certainty. You steady yourself. The ship groans with a deeper resonance now, the kind that echoes through its ribs like a voice trying to clear its throat. A loose rope thrashes against a beam. You step forward to secure it, fingers working quickly, despite the dampness that slicks the fibres. Water splashes against your legs, cold but not shocking. You pull the knot tight and step back, breathing slowly. You realise how small your insistence on survival is compared to the vast, indifferent machinery around you. It isn't a despairing thought, it's a clarifying one. The storm is simply a pattern the world follows. You are the anomaly, a single body trying to negotiate terms with something that does not recognise negotiations. Thunder rolls again, longer this time. The sound sweeps across the sky like a long exhale. You feel the vibration underfoot, the way the ship acknowledges each rumble with a soft internal echo. The waves rise in cleaner, more deliberate arcs, not vicious, just larger. The sea adopts a new rhythm, and you are left with the choice of resisting it or matching it. You choose what every sailor chooses, cooperation rather than challenge. The first real sheet of rain arrives. It falls in angled lines, carried by the wind rather than descending directly. The droplets sting your skin, but not sharply. They're cool, insistent taps, like the world reminding you not to drift too far into thought. The deck darkens under the wetness. The figurines remain still, their small bodies catching stray drops without protest. The storm surrounds you now, but not as an enemy. It envelops you the way a forest envelops a lost traveller, without interest in your presence, without urgency in your direction. You feel the shift from light wind to steady force, the kind that fills a sail whether you want it to or not. The routes you once knew disappear behind a curtain of grey water and wind, erased not out of cruelty, but out of indifference. You breathe in the storm air deeply. It carries a taste of iron and sky stone. It fills your chest with a hollow coolness that settles somewhere deep inside you. You feel no panic, only a slow, resigned awareness that the world is larger than any path drawn through it. Your muscles tighten not in fear, but in readiness. The ship rolls. The sky groans. The sea climbs and falls. You are carried not toward anything, but away. The world doesn't push you to punish you. It simply moves the way it always has. You happen to be in its path, and as the wind pulls your ship into the thickening grey, you accept the simple, unadorned truth at the heart of every storm. It doesn't mean harm. It doesn't mean anything. It is the indifference that terrifies. It is the indifference that sets you adrift. Hunger arrives quietly, without ceremony, settling into your body the way morning mist settles over the sea. You notice it first as a faint emptiness behind your ribs, a hollow that expands each time the ship dips into a trough. The storm has passed, leaving behind an exhausted calm that feels less like relief and more like the silence after someone has finished speaking truths you weren't prepared to hear. The horizon has grown wide again, unbroken, showing nothing except the long, slow pulse of water that carries you wherever it pleases. You sit near the bow, knees drawn slightly inward, feeling the wood warm beneath you as the sun pushes through the thin clouds. The light has a strange tenderness to it, as if trying to apologize for the wind that drove you so far off the lines sailors trust. The air tastes dry despite the moisture clinging to your skin. Salt coats your lips in a thin, irritating crust, as though the sea insists on marking you, even when it has nothing left to throw. Your stomach tightens in small waves. It is not the sharp pain of immediate need, but a slow erosion of strength, the kind that strips away the outer layers of your thoughts. Hunger has a way of simplifying the world, reducing it to the bare essentials. A ship, a sky, a stretch of water, a body learning the quiet vocabulary of deprivation. You lean your head back and let your eyes drift across the expanse. The water moves with a deceptive gentleness now. Soft folds, rhythmic crests, the faint shimmer of sun reflected in drifting fragments. The sea seems almost reflective in this state, as though contemplating its own vastness. You find yourself mirroring its mood, slipping into thoughts you once avoided with the precision of someone stepping around sharp stones. There is a strange honesty in these days. With the storm's insistence gone, and the offerings tucked back into their bowl, your mind has room for truths usually drowned out by routine. You think of all the things you believed mattered: status, appearance, the judgment of people whose opinions swayed with the weather. The sea has no patience for any of that. It strips away pretenses with the same ease it strips sails. Out here, ambition looks embarrassingly delicate. You dip your hand into the water. The cold clings to your fingers, sharper than the air. Hunger has made your senses more alert, sharpening edges you didn't know had blurred. You feel everything more directly. The friction of rope against your palm, the weight of your own breath, the lingering soreness in your shoulders from holding the ship steady as the storm pushed it sideways. The sea touches your skin again and again, each repetition an indifferent reminder of how much it can take without effort. Your thoughts drift to food without your permission, not feasts or indulgences, just the modest meals of home, bread still warm from the hearth, olives pressed between fingers, lentils simmered in a clay pot that always seemed to smell faintly of smoke. You remember the casual abundance of those moments, how you ate without thinking, how hunger then was nothing more than a brief inconvenience. You almost laugh at the memory of complaining about stale bread. Complaints belong to people who believe solutions are nearby. You glance at the small supply basket tucked against the mast. Most of it has been reduced to scraps, remnants of what you once thought would last long enough. A few withered figs clinging to their stems like exhausted insects. A half-cracked jar of water, its surface glinting with a hesitation that tells you it will soon be insufficient. You ration what remains, not because you believe it will save you, but because the act of rationing gives your hands something to do besides tremble. Hunger lengthens the hours. You feel time stretching, each minute expanding into a thin, translucent sheet you can almost see through. The sun moves overhead in deliberate arcs, casting shadows that change so gradually you barely notice until the deck has shifted into another shade entirely. Your body adjusts to this deceleration. Your heartbeat slows. Your thoughts drift like floating reeds, carried more by current than intent. You lie back against the deck, letting the wood cradle your shoulder blades. The sky above you is impossibly pale, drained of all the vigorous blue you remember from earlier days. Hunger paints the world in muted colours. Even the sea seems quieter, as though conserving its energy for tides yet to come. You close your eyes and listen to the faint slap of water against the hull. Each sound feels larger in the emptiness around it. The truth is that hunger is not cruel. It is simply truthful. It teaches you the natural ranking of needs, reminding you that survival is grounded in simple beginnings. It removes the illusions you wrapped around yourself. The belief that purpose requires grand gestures, the idea that the world must respond to your will, the assumption that you can plan your way through chance. Hunger replaces these with something plainer and far more honest. The awareness that a body persists through small acts and small mercies. You shift again, propping yourself up as the ship drifts into a calmer patch of water. A faint breeze brushes your cheek, carrying with it the stale scent of your own sweat, mixed with the sea's habitual salt. You taste the air, not because you expect food in it, but because you have grown accustomed to seeking meaning in sensations. Hunger sharpens the boundary between need and desire. It simplifies your thoughts until even yearning becomes a kind of clarity. Your fingers trace the deck absent-mindedly, following grooves etched by years of travel. You imagine the hands that built this ship, calloused, measured, guided by experience more than hope. They crafted a vessel designed to carry people across distances that always seem smaller when you stand on land. Now, with no land in sight, the same distances feel like the edges of the world. It becomes difficult to tell whether the ship is carrying you across the sea or whether the sea is carrying you across your own fading certainty. Your throat feels dry. You take a small sip from the jar, enough to trick your body into believing something has been offered. The water hits your stomach with a refreshing ache. You put the jar back carefully, aware that every drop now carries the weight of significance. Hunger has taught you to measure value, not in abundance, but in endurance. You think again of home, not with longing, but with the detached clarity that comes from distance. The city's markets, the lines of amphorae waiting to be sealed, the shrines tucked between walls, the voices that once filled your mornings with predictable noise. Those images feel softer now, edges blurring into something dreamlike. Hunger does not make you sentimental. It simply removes distractions until the past appears as a single, unbroken feeling rather than a sequence of events. You run your palm across your stomach, feeling the faint concavity there. Your body is learning to speak a language you rarely studied. The sea, indifferent as always, moves beneath you in long, steady breaths. You match your breathing to its rhythm, drawing in air that tastes of distance and letting it escape with a quiet resignation. The sun angles lower, casting a warm sheen across the water. You gather yourself enough to sit upright again. The day slips slowly toward its close, though nothing resembling closure waits for you. Hunger has hollowed out a space inside you, not cruelly, but thoroughly. It's an uncluttered place where unnecessary thoughts cannot stay long. Only truth fits there. Small truths, steady truths, the kind that don't impress but endure. You look over the edge of the ship. The sea stares back without interest. Its patience frightens you more than its storms. Storms want nothing, but they end. Hunger, on the other hand, lingers. It settles into the blood, the thoughts, the gestures. It whispers its lessons in the smallest ways, reminding you of your limits, revealing your reliance on a world that owes you nothing. You rest again, feeling the ship shift beneath you, as if responding to your breath. The sky darkens gradually, stretching shadows across the deck. You watch the first faint stars appear, scattered like fragments of a story too old to be retold. You let the night take shape around you, its stillness comforting in its finality. Hunger does not punish you. It clarifies you. It strips away layers until only the essential remains. And as your eyes grow heavier, your body sinking into the wooden planks, you understand that truth more deeply than you ever did on land. You are not simply lost at sea. You are being unmade and remade by it, each day carving away something unnecessary, each night showing you the thin line between survival and surrender. And so you lie there, quiet, listening to the sea's calm breathing, while hunger teaches you the harshest, simplest truth of all. Nothing in the world is truly yours. Not land, not certainty, not even your own strength. Only the moments you endure. Night arrives without hurry, folding itself around you with a calm certainty that leaves little room for resistance. The last traces of daylight slip quietly into the water, and the horizon dissolves into a single, indistinguishable line. The sea breathes evenly beneath the ship, its movements gentler now, as if the world has entered a long exhale. Your hunger lingers in the background like a tired companion, no longer sharp, only persistent. What takes its place is something wider, something that stretches far beyond the reach of your hands. The sky opens above you with an ease that feels almost careless. It is too vast to fully register at once. Your eyes can only climb so far before surrendering. Stars emerge slowly at first, timid sparks scattered in the upper air, but soon they gather in great clusters, spreading out in patterns that seem to mock the limits of human comprehension. Their clarity is unsettling. You had forgotten that a sky untouched by lamplight or smoke could look like this. So clean, so sharp-edged, so indifferent. You lie on your back across the deck, letting the wood press lightly into your spine. The faint salt dampness touches your shoulder blades. A cool night wind slides over your skin, the stars settle above you, and the small boards of your ship feel suddenly fragile, as though you are lying on a thin raft between two endless directions. You inhale deeply, tasting the faint metallic chill that settles into the air when nighttime takes full command. The constellations you once traced in temple frescoes do not behave as you remember. The bull that priests insisted symbolized strength stretches in awkward angles now, its supposed horns reduced to two dim points that hardly resemble anything living. The hunter, whose stories were repeated with such confidence by elders, looks like a scattering of dots held together only by human stubbornness. The mythical beasts painted on palace walls seem laughably elaborate compared to the stark minimalism of the real stars. The sky does not bother shaping itself for human stories. You remember, distantly, a teacher tapping a reed against the painted dome of the temple ceiling. Her voice measured as she explained how the gods placed each star with purpose. Yet, as you stare upward now, nothing feels intentional. The sky looks too large to have been arranged by a divine hand. It is untidy in a way that feels honest. Stars clumped in places, scattered in others, like seeds dropped by an absent-minded farmer. The sky is not a message. It is an expanse. Your breath settles into a slow rhythm. You watch it appear and fade as a faint warmth on the cool air. You feel the thinness of that boundary, your breath rising into the night, immediately claimed by the dark above. The separation between your life and the sky's vastness grows thinner the longer you lie there. You feel like a small flicker, one exhale away from being folded into the night entirely. The ship rocks gently, a small reminder that you still belong to something solid, even as the sky threatens to swallow your sense of proportion. The water laps at the hull in quiet rhythms, each sound dissolving into the darkness as soon as it forms. You reach a hand over the side of the ship, letting your fingers skim the surface. The sea is cool, carrying no memory of the day's warmth. The water slips away easily, leaving your hand damp and faintly chilled. That brief contact anchors you for a moment, but the sky pulls again, vast and soft and relentless. You close your eyes and listen. The night has its own textures. A distant groan of wood from the ship's frame, the quiet slap of a loose rope against the mast, the faint whistle of wind moving across the open water. You hear your heartbeat too, a muted, steady drum that sounds both intimate and impersonal, as though it belongs to a body that is simply carrying out its function rather than participating in your fear. When you open your eyes again, the sky seems even larger. The Milky Way stretches across it in a pale sweep, a band of faint light that feels like the residue of something ancient and exhausted. You follow its arc with your gaze until it fades into the blackness. Somewhere in that vast expanse, you imagine, lie countless stories told by other sailors who stared upward in their own drifting nights. The sky has heard every confession ever whispered by frightened men at sea. It has forgotten all of them. Your hunger deepens the quiet. It softens your thoughts, making them less linear, more fluid. You drift between ideas, the way the ship drifts between currents. You think of home, not with longing, but with a muted detachment. The village streets, the shrines, the rituals, all feel small under this infinite canopy. You imagine the island shrinking into the distance of memory, not because you want it to, but because the sky makes everything modest by comparison. A single shooting star cuts across your vision, brief and unimportant. You imagine priests somewhere insisting such a thing is a sign. Out here, it is only movement. Dust burning, light passing, a reminder that even celestial bodies fall apart. You find a strange comfort in that. The sky's grandeur does not save it from decay. Its vastness does not protect it from impermanence. Your limbs feel heavier as the night deepens. You turn onto your side, watching the stars through the rigging. The ropes carve lines across the sky, dividing constellations into imperfect shapes. The world seems arranged by accident. Threads, lights, and water pulled together without intention. You breathe slowly, the deck rising just enough to remind you that you have not floated away. A faint chill creeps along your arms, settling into your bones. You pull your legs closer to your chest. The stars remain unbothered. Their light falls on your face with the cold precision of distant fires that neither warm nor guide. You stare at them long enough to feel them pressing into your thoughts. They are too distant to offer comfort, too numerous to provide direction, too ancient to even notice your existence. You think of the stories elders told, how constellations watched over sailors, how stars guided voyages, how gods travelled their paths. Those ideas crumble under the weight of the sky above you now. The stars do not watch, they do not guide. They exist in vast, indifferent arrangements, unaware of the human stories tangled beneath them. You exhale, and the breath fades into the cold. You realize how fragile your presence is, how thin the distance between your breath and the void above, how easily a wave, a gust, a slip could erase you without changing anything in the sky's arrangement. The realization is not frightening, it is clarifying. Your thoughts slow further, drifting into something resembling calm. Hunger has made your mind oddly clear, stripped of unnecessary decoration. The night amplifies that clarity. You lie there beneath the weightless expanse, accepting that you have wandered farther than myths ever warned of. The stars look colder now, not in temperature, but in meaning. They mark distance, not destiny. You shift again, letting the deck support your tired body. Your fingers find the frayed edge of a rope, its coarse fibres grounding you in something unequivocally real. The night stretches on. The sky remains impossibly large. You feel yourself shrinking in a way that does not diminish you so much as place you correctly within the scale of the world. The darkness deepens, the stars sharpen, your breath becomes a small, warm thing in the vast, cool air. And as you watch the sky swell above you, you feel yourself drifting, not away from life, but into a deeper understanding of how small a life truly is when measured against the quiet immensity of the world. Night has a way of loosening the knots inside your thoughts, and when the sky finally begins to pale at its edges, the world around you feels strangely hollow, as if the darkness has swept through your mind and rearranged what it found there. You sit upright on the deck, your muscles protesting the movement, and draw in a slow breath of morning air. The sea has quieted to a soft murmur, its vastness stretching across the faint silver horizon. There is no urgency in its rhythm now, only an unhurried persistence that folds itself around you. You watch the first drift of light brush across the water. It comes gently, touching the waves one by one, leaving a thin path of brightness that seems too delicate to belong to something as powerful as dawn. The emptiness of the sky, the wide vacancy where stars once glimmered, gives you a kind of fragile relief. For a moment you feel suspended between the remnants of night and the uncertain promise of day. It is in that quiet space that memories begin to rise. They come not as visions or sharp recollections, but as slow-moving tides, pulled from depths you rarely bother to explore. A voice here, a gesture there, a half-finished task still waiting somewhere in your abandoned life. You don't summon them. They arrive of their own accord, carried by currents you cannot control. You sit with them because there is nothing else to do, nothing else to anchor you besides these small fragments returning from the edges of forgetfulness. You remember the sound of your father's sandals scuffing across the courtyard at dawn, steady and repetitive, a rhythm that once annoyed you with its predictability. You recall the way he spoke, a man who believed wisdom was something delivered in short, inconvenient bursts. His advice had always felt too heavy, too rigid for someone who spent his days on land. Yet here, drifting where the sea decides to carry you, his warnings echo with a faint humour. His certainty seems almost childish beside the honest uncertainties of the water. Another memory rises, your mother humming while kneading dough, her voice carrying no particular tune, only a soft repetition that matched the push of her palms against the dough. The sound wasn't meant to comfort, it was simply the byproduct of habit. Yet now, as the waves press gently against the hull, you hear that same rhythm in the ocean's movement. You wonder how many things you've overlooked because they seem too ordinary at the time. A faint swell lifts the ship, and your mind drifts again. A friend's laugh echoes from somewhere deep inside your chest, distant but clear enough to recognize. The two of you standing near the market stalls, joking about a trader who swore his figs could cure loneliness. You had laughed then, brushing off the claim with youthful confidence. Now you find the idea oddly poignant. Loneliness is not something cured, only paused by distraction. And out here, distractions have become rare. Another memory slips into view, one you would have preferred remained buried, a small argument you never resolved, a promise you made lightly and broke easily, a task you postponed, believing there would always be time to finish it. Hunger and exhaustion have softened your resistance to these recollections. You allow them to approach, knowing they carry no more weight than the waves nudging the ship. Mistakes that once seemed heavy feel strangely irrelevant under an open sky. Regret becomes just another detail in a life too small to impress the sea. You rest your elbows on your knees and stare at the water. The sea listens, with its own quiet patience. There is no judgment in the lapping of waves, no condemnation in the soft rise and fall. If anything, its silence feels like a kind of acknowledgement, an ancient acceptance that humans have always carried their small embarrassments with them. You imagine countless sailors before you, whispering their confessions into the night, believing the sea might cleanse them, or at least disperse them into something too vast to hold a grudge. The water reflects the sky now, pale and thin, as if wearing a borrowed light. You watch it move in long repeating lines. Each crest seems to lift a memory with it. Hold it briefly at the surface, then slip it back into depths where it belongs. You begin to understand why sailors speak of the ocean as something alive, something ancient enough to remember what people forget. Not because it cares, but because caring is unnecessary for remembering. Your body shifts with the ship's movement, and the sound of ropes brushing against the mast makes another memory surface, standing with your older brother near the harbour as he taught you to tie a proper knot. He insisted on precision, scolding you gently when your loops were sloppy. You resented him slightly for it, convinced he was showing off. Now, Looking at the knots holding the mast steady, you feel a quiet gratitude for his insistence. Small lessons, once irritating, become lifelines in harsher surroundings. You close your eyes, letting the brightness seep through your eyelids. Memories continue their slow procession, faces of people who never imagined you would wander so far, textures of everyday life, stone floors warmed by sun, fabric roughened by repeated washing, the smell of oil lamps smoking in narrow rooms. The ordinary becomes sacred when revisited from a distance. The sea does not erase your past, it magnifies its simplicity until you can finally see it clearly. A wave bumps against the hull in a gentle but distinct motion. Your eyes open, and the water stretches before you again. The horizon is clearer, though still empty. You exhale through your nose, feeling the weight of everything you've remembered settle into your chest. Not as a burden, but as a truth you finally agreed to stop arguing with. Memory is not a punishment. It is a sorting device, returning pieces of your life in slow cycles like shells washing onto shore. You run a hand across your face, feeling the dryness around your eyes. Fatigue presses into your limbs with a familiar heaviness, but you welcome it. Weariness dulls the sharp edges of longing. It makes recollections easier to hold without being overwhelmed. You lean back against the mast, the wood warm from the strengthening sun. The movement of the ship feels steadier today, less like a force pushing you and more like a rhythm guiding you along. Another memory rises, quieter than the others. The face of an old woman who used to sit near the well, weaving baskets that never seemed finished. She once told you that people spend most of their lives waiting for fortune, waiting for change, waiting for storms to pass. You dismissed her words as the ramblings of someone too tired to do anything but talk. Yet now, drifting without direction, you understand the truth embedded in her voice. You are waiting too, though for what you cannot name. You reach for the water jar, taking a slow sip. The taste is thin, almost metallic. You swallow anyway, letting the liquid settle into the emptiness of your stomach. The memories soften again, retreating like a tide pulling back into deeper water. You do not cling to them. They are not meant to be held permanently. They come and go with their own rhythm, matching the sea's patient cycles. The world brightens further. Light spills across the deck, illuminating the faint cracks in the wood, the frayed ends of rope, the sparse remnants of supplies. It touches your face too, drawing you gently out of the haze of recalled voices and half-finished recollections. The warmth eases a little of the tightness in your chest. You listen again to the sea. It murmurs softly under the growing light, unbothered by your thoughts, unchanged by your memories. Its silence offers the same impartial comfort it has given to countless others. Each wave rises, pauses, and falls, carrying secrets you will never know. You find yourself breathing in time with it, as though drawn into its quiet cadence. You don't feel healed, you don't feel absolved, you simply feel settled, like sand that has finally stopped swirling after being stirred. The memories that visited you remain, but they no longer clamour for attention. They recede into the deeper parts of you, still present, but calmer. They will return again, you can sense it. But for now, they rest. The sea continues its whispered listening, and you drift with it, one small life but held lightly in its vast, indifferent hands. The horizon has a habit of staying exactly where it is, indifferent to how far you travel toward it. You have spent long hours watching that line, waiting for it to split, shift, or reveal something hidden. It never does. It remains a steady mark on the world, always distant, always unmoved by your hopes or your exhaustion. At first, you found its stubbornness frustrating. Now you find something almost soothing in its refusal to yield. Each morning, you expect the horizon to draw closer, to reward you with even the faintest sign of land or change. But it greets you with the same quiet distance, as if reminding you that human expectations have little authority over natural boundaries. The sea stretches between you and that line with the calm assurance of something that has known its place far longer than you have known yours. You rest your arms across your knees and exhale softly. The movement of the ship feels familiar now. The slow sway, the occasional list to one side, the subtle creak of ropes adjusting in their knots. These small repetitions, once unnoticed, have become anchors for your dwindling sense of time. You measure your days in the shifting of shadows across the deck, in the sound of waves against the hull, in the steady approach of hunger that comes at its own unhurried pace. Your gaze drifts back to the horizon. It is the only constant shape in your world, the only line that has not shifted or broken or been swallowed by memory. Its consistency becomes a strange comfort, a reminder that even when everything else feels unstable, there is still something that holds its place. It doesn't offer hope or direction, it simply exists, and its existence is enough to steady your thoughts when they threaten to unravel. The monotony of the sea has begun to carve out a space inside you, a quiet hollow where unnecessary thoughts have grown silent. You no longer argue with the horizon or demand explanations from it. You have accepted that progress on the water rarely looks like movement. Most journeys unfold in patterns, repetition disguised as effort, persistence disguised as direction. You begin to understand that people often mistake motion for purpose simply because they fear stillness. The sun lifts higher, warming the top of your shoulders. You shift slightly, letting the heat settle into your bones. The light glints off the water in thin slivers, each one appearing only for an instant before vanishing into the next ripple. You watch those fleeting flashes, recognizing in them a kind of truth. Brightness, like progress, rarely lingers long enough to be claimed. A distant swell lifts the ship in a slow, rolling arc. You lean into the movement, your body adjusting without thought. The horizon, of course, does not move at all. You study that calm straightness, its unwavering serenity. It has watched countless ships drift across its surface, each one full of people, believing they were advancing towards something. Yet from the horizon's perspective, everything remains the same. Waves rising and falling, clouds shifting overhead, and human lives passing through its view like small disturbances in an otherwise eternal rhythm. You feel the weight of that understanding settle into your chest. It is not heavy, it is clarifying. The sea teaches through consistency. The horizon teaches through distance. Together, they shape you into someone who sees the world less in terms of accomplishment and more in terms of endurance. You wipe the salt from your lips. It leaves a faint sting, a reminder that the sea touches everything eventually. Your thoughts drift back to the tasks of home you once believed were important. The hurried errands, the half-complete obligations, the restless plans for the future. None of them hold weight here. The horizon cares nothing for unaccomplished ambitions. It does not recognize success or failure. It sees only the present moment stretching toward it. A few gulls appear overhead, circling with lazy confidence. Their cries are thin and distant, their wings cutting through the air with effortless precision. You watch them glide, free of the limitations that hold you bound to the deck. Yet even they cannot reach the horizon. They skim the air above the waves, turn in wide arcs, and return to their invisible nests, never claiming the far-off line you have been staring at for days. You find some comfort in that too, knowing that even creatures born with wings are subject to the same unreachable distance. The day grows warmer, heat gathers on the deck, rising through the wood in gentle pulses. You lay one hand flat against it, feeling the tinder dry warmth seep into your palm. The ship seems almost alive under the sun, expanding slightly in the heat, its planks shifting in soft murmurs. You move your fingers along the grain of the wood, tracing lines worn smooth by countless journeys. Each groove, each knot, each tiny crack feels like a record of a different sailor, a different misfortune, a different prayer whispered into the wind. Yet none of those marks tell a story of reaching the horizon. They tell only of moving through the world, not conquering it. A faint breeze brushes the back of your neck, carrying with it the mineral scent of open water. You let the air slip across your skin, cooling the heat that has settled there. It's a simple sensation, but it feels grounding in a way that thought cannot provide. The breeze touches you without motive. The sea supports you without intention. The horizon challenges you without hostility. These forces do not care what you hope for, and in their indifference you find a kind of peace. You drink a small sip of water, letting it wash through the dryness in your throat. The relief is brief, but welcome. You return the jar to its place and lean back once more, stretching your legs across the deck. The sun's heat relaxes the ache in your muscles, making them loosen gradually. You close your eyes for a moment, breathing in the blend of wood, salt, and warm wind. When you open them again, the horizon is still exactly where it was. You watch it without frustration. The sea has taught you the quiet discipline of acceptance. Progress is not always measured in distance, and direction is not always something you choose. Sometimes, existing within the boundaries of what the world allows is the only form of forward movement available. You shift to lie down on the deck, letting your gaze travel upward for a moment before returning to the edges of the world. The horizon remains steady, a thin line dividing what you can reach from what you can only imagine. It no longer feels like a barrier. It feels like a companion, silent, distant, unchanging, a reminder that the world does not bend to human timelines, no matter how desperate the desire. The ship glides gently across the water, carried by currents too subtle to notice. You feel the faint vibration under your ribs, a soothing hum that makes the monotony feel calm rather than oppressive. The horizon watches from afar, offering no promises, no warnings, no illusions. It is exactly what it appears to be, and in that honesty, you find a comfort you did not know you needed. You breathe slowly, letting your thoughts settle into the steady rhythm of the waves. The world narrows to a simple truth. Movement can happen without progress, and progress can happen without arrival. You accept this without argument. The horizon remains distant, but it no longer feels unkind. You close your eyes briefly, letting the sun warm your eyelids. When you open them again, the line of blue is still there, unchanged, unbothered, unmoved. And somehow, that quiet refusal to shift teaches you how to stay still without feeling lost. The sun drifts toward its late arc, and the light softens into a muted gold that settles along the length of the ship. The warmth on your skin fades inch by inch, replaced by a coolness that hints at the long evening ahead. The horizon still holds its distant posture, and the sea moves in its unbroken rhythm, neither encouraging nor discouraging your presence. It is in this stretch of quiet that you feel a familiar weight rise inside you. Not hunger, not fear, but the subtle ache of solitude. The kind of solitude that makes sound feel necessary. You clear your throat gently, hearing how small the noise seems in the open air. It is swallowed almost immediately by wind and water, leaving no echo behind. A part of you resents that silence. Another part finds it too large to confront directly. So you reach for the habits you once dismissed as childish inventions of faith, the tiny rituals carried by generations who feared the sea long before you drifted into its indifferent vastness. Your hand rests on the deck. Without thinking, you tap your fingers against the wood in a slow pattern, one you learned as a child sitting outside a shrine, imitating the rhythms the priest drummed to summon attention from absent gods. Tap, pause, tap, tap, longer pause. You remember the pride you once felt when you finally memorized it, as though repeating the pattern correctly made you worthy of being seen. Now, the rhythm holds no ambition. It simply fills the air with something other than silence. You hum a tune next, softly at first, barely a breath shaped into sound. It is not a song with purpose or meaning. only an old chant sung during processions, something like a lullaby for the divine. Your voice wavers, uncertain, as though unaccustomed to being used. It gains steadiness slowly, each note floating outward for a brief moment before dissolving into the distance. The ocean, true to its nature, offers no reply, and yet the act of humming feels like a thread you throw outward, hoping it catches on something, even if that something is only the fading light. You adjust your position, drawing your cloak tighter around your shoulders. The fabric smells faintly of stale smoke and worn rope, a mixture of land and sea that clings stubbornly despite the days spent drifting. You breathe it in and let your fingers trace small patterns across the edge of the cloth. Another unconscious ritual, one your mother used to perform before lighting lamps at dusk. She always claimed the gesture helped the flame catch. You never understood the logic, but you repeat it now anyway, more for comfort than belief. Your eyes drift to the small bowl where your figurines rest. They sit as still as ever, their features softened by the dimming light. You lift one gently, turning it over in your hand. The stone is cool, grounding. You whisper a few words to it, not out of devotion, but because speaking to an object feels less foolish than speaking into empty air. You tell it you are tired. You tell it the horizon has not moved. You tell it that hunger has begun to feel like a quiet companion. You tell it that the sky grows too large in the night. The figurine does not respond, of course. You don't expect it to. But the act of speaking steadies something inside you, reminding you that your voice still exists, still carries weight, even when no one hears it. You set the figurine back into the bowl and touch the rim with a small tap, an echo of farewell, though no one taught you that gesture. It simply arises, a reflex born from loneliness. Your feet carry you toward the stern, where the ship narrows and the ropes sway in long arcs. You reach out to steady one, feeling its worn fibers beneath your fingers. Another ritual comes to you then, unbidden. The act of running your hand along a rope from end to knot, murmuring a simple phrase meant to ward off misfortune. You never believed the phrase held power. Even now, its words feel strangely hollow. Yet the motion itself offers comfort, as though reminding the rope, and perhaps yourself, that the world has not been entirely emptied of structure. The wind picks up slightly, tugging at strands of your hair and letting them fall back across your forehead. You push them away and draw in a slow breath. The air carries a faint sharpness, the taste of oncoming night. You exhale with a thin sigh. The sound escapes your lips and vanishes immediately, devoured by the space around you. You sense the silence again, the deep, unbroken silence of open water, the kind that does not simply lack noise but seems to exist in defiance of it. You understand instinctively why people invented rituals. Not to please the gods, but to protect themselves from the emptiness that stretches between each heartbeat. Your hand drifts toward your chest, and you tap lightly once more. Tap, pause, tap, tap. The rhythm feels almost like breathing. You let it settle into your bones, the steady beat soothing in its repetition. You feel your shoulders loosen, the tension ebbing like a tide retreating from the sand. The sea moves with that same slow retreat, its waves slipping along the hull in soft murmurs. You walk toward the bow, placing each foot with measured balance. The ship feels lighter here, as if its wooden ribs exhale more easily at the front. You rest both hands on the railing and lean forward slightly, gazing down into the water. The surface reflects the fading sky, blue shifting into purple, purple into a bruised shade of grey. You watch your reflection ripple and fracture, your face bending into shapes you barely recognise. You whisper another chant, one meant to keep travellers safe on difficult paths. The irony of performing it now, adrift without path or destination, does not escape you. You whisper it anyway, letting the ancient words rest briefly on your tongue before dissolving into the air. A faint tremor runs through the deck as the current shifts. The ship adjusts automatically, creaking in familiar patterns. You place your palm on the railing and feel the subtle vibration travel through your bones. It reminds you of temple floors during festivals, those moments when drums shook the earth and the crowd's footsteps blurred into a single, unified pulse. You find comfort in remembering that feeling, even though it exists now only as an echo. You murmur a few more words, not prayers, not pleas, just fragments of thoughts shaped into sound. You speak because sound makes you visible, even if only to yourself. You speak because silence feels too similar to vanishing. The gods may not listen, but your own voice threads through the empty space like a thin line thrown into deep water. You adjust a rope, not because it needs adjusting, but because the act feels purposeful. You straighten the cloth offerings, letting them flutter weakly in the cooling wind. You realign the bowl by a fraction of an inch. You kneel, run your thumb across the deck, and whisper a line from a blessing you barely recall. None of these gestures carry power, yet each one carries intention. And intention, out here, is its own form of survival. The sky darkens further. The first stars begin to appear, faint pinpricks scattered across the deepening blue. You watch them emerge with a quiet smile that feels more like habit than emotion. You hum the same chant again, slower this time, letting the notes stretch and loosen until they nearly dissolve. Your rituals do not shield you from hunger or loneliness. They do not summon wind or reveal land. They do not lift the ship or calm the sea. They do only one thing. They remind you that you exist. They remind you that you are still someone moving through the world, even when the world offers nothing in return. You kneel once more beside the railing, head bowed slightly, eyes half closed. You tap the wood 3 times, an old gesture for safety on uncertain waters. The sound is soft, swallowed quickly, but you feel the echo inside your chest, subtle and grounding. You rise slowly. The night has taken hold now, its quiet settling over the water with a soft authority. You let your hands fall loosely at your sides. You breathe and the breath feels steady. The silence no longer frightens you, it simply is. The sea is listening, as it always has, without judgment or interest. Your rituals are small, perhaps absurd, but they create a thin thread between you and the emptiness around you. And in the deepening night, that thread is enough. Evening drifts in without resistance, softening the edges of the day until the ship feels suspended in a world that has grown too tired for sharp outlines. The rituals you murmured earlier fade from your lips, leaving only the faint memory of sound lingering in the cooling air. Your body settles into the space between exhaustion and stillness, a place where thoughts no longer rush but wander with the slow steadiness of drifting tideweed. You sit at the stern, the wooden beam beneath you warmed by the sun, and now gently releasing that warmth as night arrives. The sea moves with a rhythm so slow it feels nearly deliberate, as if it too has grown contemplative. You watch the faint ripple of waves under the dimming light, their crests rising with a kind of resigned grace. The horizon is no longer visible, swallowed by the smudged transition between day and darkness, but you no longer strain to find it. The absence feels less like a threat and more like an expected quiet. You breathe deeply, and the air settles into your lungs with a cool finality. Hunger lies low in your body, a dull presence rather than a sharp demand. Thirst tugs gently at your throat, but even that discomfort feels muted, softened by a thinning sense of urgency. You lean your head back against the railing and let your eyes drift upward. The first stars appear, scattered across a sky that seems wider than memory. They glow with the distant indifference of things too old to care about the fates of those who move below them. You watch them flicker, small glints in an otherwise endless dark, and realize how strange it is that fear begins to loosen its hold at the exact moment logic insists it should tighten. A quiet resignation settles into you, as if placed there by a careful hand. It does not feel like giving up. It feels like recognizing a truth that has been present from the beginning, a truth you are too preoccupied to acknowledge. Death, if it comes, will not be a sudden violence or a dramatic collapse. It will arrive with the same slow patience the sea uses to shape coastlines. Not cruel, not kind, just inevitable. You rest your palms flat on the deck, feeling the faint vibration of the ship's internal sighs. Somewhere within the wood, air pockets shift, ropes creak in their loops. The hull whispers a language of aging, one that sailors understand instinctively, even if they never speak of it. You listen without alarm. Every structure wears down with time, so does every body. The sea does not trouble itself with exceptions. The calm that spreads through you is not born of strength or surrender, but of clarity. You begin to understand why ancient sailors accepted their fate so easily. It was not bravery or superstition that carried them. It was the recognition that the world had never promised them anything beyond the moment they were living. To fight the sea's will was to exhaust oneself against something too large to negotiate with. You draw your knees inward, wrapping your arms loosely around them. The motion feels instinctive, a way to keep warm or to protect the soft center of yourself. The wood beneath your feet carries the faint residue of the day's heat. You shift slightly, letting it press into your skin in small comforting patches. The night deepens, the air grows cooler, the stars glow more fiercely, their clarity almost overwhelming. You feel the world inhale around you, as if the sea and sky are sharing a single, enormous breath. The ship sways gently with that breath, and you sway with it, held in a rhythm older than any story you were taught. You close your eyes for a moment, listening. The silence is not absolute. Nothing in nature ever is, but it is close enough to feel full. Each small sound stands out more clearly. The slap of water, the distant groan of wood, the faint whistle of wind brushing past the mast. These sounds remind you that the world is still moving, still alive, even if your own body is slowing. A thought drifts across your mind like a leaf across water. Perhaps this is what acceptance truly is. Not optimism, not despair, not defiance, simply the absence of argument. You open your eyes and look toward the bow, where the figurines still rest in their bowl, untouched by storm or hunger or time. Their shapes are faint in the low light, indistinct but present. You wonder why you carried them. Not for protection. You're certain now that no stone token could alter the sea's intent, but perhaps for company. A reminder that even small objects can absorb fear simply by giving you something to look at. You turn your gaze back to the sky. The constellations feel less instructive tonight, their outlines too faint to match the stories repeated on temple walls. Instead, they resemble what they actually are. Distant embers, cold and ancient, arranged in ways that have nothing to do with the people who name them. You take comfort in their honesty. They are what they are, nothing more, nothing less. Your breath grows slow and steady. Hunger flattens into a background ache. The worst possibilities unfold in your thoughts without urgency, drifting until your strength fades, falling asleep and never waking, becoming another nameless story carried by the waves until it dissolves entirely. You do not recoil from these images. They approach like familiar travelers, recognized not for their threat, but for their inevitability. You rest your head against the railing again. The wood presses into your skull with a softness worn down by years of use. You find the pressure reassuring in an odd way, an anchor to the physical world, when so much of your internal landscape has grown hazy. You tap the railing gently, not as a ritual this time, but as a simple gesture meant to remind yourself of the material reality beneath your hands. The sky darkens further, turning the sea into a vast mirror that reflects only fragments of starlight. The boundary between water and air fades until the world feels suspended in a single, continuous dark. You feel yourself drifting into that darkness internally, thoughts growing spacious, edges softening. There is a peculiar relief in letting go of the insistence that you must be saved. The world shrinks to the length of the deck and the stretch of night around you. You are alive, yes, but the urgency of survival has quieted. The worst is no longer a force to resist, but a possibility you have made room for. You feel no shame in that acceptance. People on land confuse control with safety. The sea corrects that mistake with gentle brutality. You breathe again, long and slow. Your body relaxes into the boards. You observe the ache in your limbs with detachment, as if it belongs to someone else. Pain becomes a fact rather than a complaint. Fatigue becomes simply another state of being. You are surprised by the steadiness of your own thoughts, how calm they feel while circling subjects that once would have frightened you. You imagine the ancient sailors whose bones rest beneath these waters. Men who drifted into storms, or faded into hunger, or slipped quietly under waves with no witness. People imagine their ends as tragedies, but you suspect many of them reach the same stillness you feel now. Not bravery, just the slow settling of all arguments inside the mind, until nothing remains but the simple truth that bodies return to the world that formed them. A faint swell rocks the ship, and the movement feels almost affectionate. You curl slightly, letting the sensation carry you. The sea's touch holds no malice. It does not seek your end. It simply continues, following its own rhythm. And if your life happens to align with that rhythm's decline, it is neither a punishment nor a judgment. You look at your hands in the dim light. They tremble faintly. The trembling does not frighten you. It feels like another truth the sea has drawn from you. The world reduces you to your essentials out here. Breath, bone, memory, acceptance. Your gaze lifts to the sky once more. The stars blink with quiet insistence, as if reminding you that night always stretches farther than you believe. You let your breath slow to match that distant scattered light. The sea murmurs beneath you, and the cool air settles against your skin with the softness of a final understanding. You do not know what will become of you. You no longer strain for answers. You allow yourself to drift on the idea that whatever comes next is not something you control, only something you meet. The calm you feel is strange, but it is steady. The kind of calm that arrives only when there is nothing left to resist. The worst no longer frightens you. It simply waits, patient and impersonal, like everything else in the world. The night thins slowly, worn down by the steady breathing of the sea. You feel the darkness release its hold in quiet increments, letting pale strands of light slip through the seams of the sky. Your eyes open to the soft shifting of dawn, and for a long while you simply lie there, listening to the faint creak of wood and the small sighs of your own lungs. The calm inside you remains, as steady as the tide, and it follows you as you sit upright, leaning your weight into the familiar grain of the railing. The world looks softer in this early light, less defined, as if it is trying to apologize for the truths it revealed in the night. The sea spreads out in muted shades of blue and grey. Each ripple glows faintly, touched by the first hints of sun. You feel the cool air settle against your skin, and though your body is weakened, something in you feels steadied by the stillness. You let your gaze travel across the open water, expecting nothing. The horizon feels like a familiar figure now, distant and self-contained, uninterested in offering surprises. You trace its line without expectation until something interrupts it. A shape, faint and soft-edged, rises where water meets sky. You rub your eyes gently, half expecting the form to dissolve into the morning haze, but it remains, thin and muted, drifting through the shimmer of heat that hovers above the waves. It is too vague to name, too far to measure. A scrap of land, or a cloud playing tricks, or a memory moulded into the shape of something you once knew. You watch it without urgency. The calm inside you leaves no space for sudden hope. You simply observe, the way one observes the changing colour of the sky, moved perhaps, but not stirred to action. You rest your hands on your knees, feeling the faint tremor in your fingers, and tilt your head as though studying a distant detail in a fresco whose meanings have faded. The shape wavers, widening slightly as the sun climbs. It glows for a moment in a thin band of light before fading back into dull shadow. Sometimes it seems closer, sometimes farther, as if existence itself is unsure of whether it should make itself known to you. You consider the possibilities with a quiet detachment. It could be an island, it could be a mirage, it could be nothing but the ocean's habit of making promises it does not intend to keep. You breathe in the cool morning air. Your lungs accept it with a weight heavier than they once carried. Hunger coils deeper into your body, no longer sharp, but something more like a slow unraveling. Thirst presses at your throat with a dryness that feels ancient. Yet neither sensation pulls your attention away from the distant shape. You continue to watch it, not with hope, but with the calm curiosity of someone who has already made peace with disappointment. The wind shifts slightly, brushing your cheek with a gentleness that feels almost apologetic. The ship adjusts its direction by a small angle, though the movement seems less like intention and more like the natural consequence of waves changing their mind. You study the faint form on the horizon again. It has darkened slightly, taking on more shape, though still too far to name. A sloping ridge perhaps, a curve of coastline, a cluster of stones, or, as the sea often does, a trick of light shaped into a silhouette you wish for but cannot reach. You rest your chin atop your hand, elbow propped against the railing. The wood beneath your skin feels warm from yesterday's sun, softened by days of exposure. That warmth anchors you in a world that continues to shift without warning. The faint shape on the horizon shivers again, its outline wavering like a memory recalled too late to matter. You imagine what it might be like to stand on solid land again, the texture of soil underfoot, the scent of growing things, herbs crushed under sandals, resinous bark warming in the sun, the faint sweetness of figs left too long on branches. You remember those sensations with a clarity sharpened by deprivation. But the thought does not unsettle you. It merely passes through your mind like wind through a reed, bending it without breaking it. The shape remains still, or perhaps it moves with the slow rising of the day. You cannot tell anymore. Distance steals certainty, blurring lines until the world feels painted rather than real. You shift your body to a more comfortable position and take the smallest possible sip from the water jar, letting the thin liquid rest on your tongue before swallowing. The island, or whatever it is, makes no effort to reassure you. It gives no sign that it wishes to be reached. You understand this with a strange sense of familiarity. The sea has always been a realm of indifferent offerings, presenting possibilities at moments when the body can no longer claim them. You imagine ancient sailors drifting towards similar shapes, sensing land too late for their limbs to carry them there. They must have watched as distant coastlines shifted like mirages, knowing that even clarity offered no guarantee of salvation. In that you find a quiet companionship, not comfort exactly, but a sense of belonging to a lineage of wandering lives, swallowed by horizons that changed nothing. The sun rises higher, brightening the crest of each wave. The faint shape shifts into something more definite, though still beyond reach. You can almost make out a ridge, perhaps a cluster of uneven stones, the faint curve of a shore. But your body does not spring into action. Your instincts, worn thin by days of drifting, no longer leap at distant promises. You only watch, your mind wrapped in a fragile calm that feels as natural as the sea breeze brushing your skin. You think briefly of stepping to the prow, of straining for a clearer view. But even in thought, the gesture feels excessive. If the shape is real, it will not be reached by effort alone. If it is false, effort will not make it true. You understand that now, more fully than ever. Not everything that looks like hope was meant to save you. The ship continues its gentle drift, moving with the unhurried indifference it has carried from the beginning. The island, if island it is, remains distant, close enough to see, too far to claim. You feel no rising panic, no surge of desperation, only a quiet recognition of the world's timing, which rarely aligns with human need. You rest your forehead against the railing, letting the wood press lightly against your skin. The breeze carries a faint scent of salt and heat, signs of a day that will grow warmer, perhaps unforgivingly so. Your eyes drift closed for a moment, and in that brief darkness, the shape on the horizon lingers behind your eyelids as a simple outline, neither promise nor threat. When you open your eyes again, the form has not vanished. It still sits there, indifferent to your gaze, unchanged by your condition. You study it with the patience that hunger and resignation have taught you. Some part of you acknowledges the possibility that this scrap of land could mean survival. Another part of you understands that it may remain forever out of reach. Both truths exist together, neither requiring immediate action. You straighten slowly, feeling the stiffness in your spine. Your throat aches for water. Your limbs carry the heaviness of days without rest or nourishment, but your mind is steady, held in place by that strange, world-weary calm the sea has carved into you. The island, if that is what it is, drifts with the haze, neither approaching nor receding, an afterthought on the world's surface. A faint offering delivered too late for certainty. You continue to watch it, not with hope, not with despair, but with the quiet understanding that some things exist only to be seen from a distance. And in that distance, the sea holds you exactly where it intends to. By the time the faint shape on the horizon gathers itself into something more certain, the day has worn down into a muted glow. The sun sits lower, the world softened by the warmth it leaves behind. You remain seated where the ship's worn boards cradle you, your body heavy, your breath slow. The drifting silhouette ahead shifts again, no longer a suggestion, but a line of darker earth rising from the water in rough contours. There is no rush in you, no sudden spark of energy at the sight. You simply take in the changing outline, as if watching a familiar story unfold in its final, inevitable chapter. The sea lifts you toward it with an unhurried persistence, each wave pushing you a little closer, though you feel more like an object being returned than a person being saved. As the distance shrinks, details emerge. Uneven rocks stacked by time, a strip of pale sand broken by patches of dark stone, a line of low shrubs tangled by the wind. You study the shore with a faint, detached curiosity. The sight stirs something small in your chest, not quite relief, not quite sorrow, just recognition that land still exists, even when the world seems to have forgotten you. The ship nudges forward, guided only by the quiet insistence of the current. Your limbs tremble as you push yourself upright, gripping the railing for balance. The beach spreads out in a crescent of muted colour, neither inviting nor hostile. It seems to watch you approach with the same impartiality the sea has always shown. When the hull finally drags across the shallows, the sound is strange, wood scraping against sand with a muffled protest, the ship's last gesture of its long endurance. You steady yourself and prepare to step down, though the movement feels ceremonial more than triumphant. You slide into the water, its chill biting gently at your ankles. The sand gives beneath your feet, soft at first, then firm as you take another step. Your legs wobble under you. The ground feels unreal after so many days of rolling water. The earth holds you with a steadiness you had forgotten, yet its stability feels unfamiliar, almost foreign. You move slowly, each step deliberate, as though testing whether the land truly intends to support you. The beach stretches out ahead, quiet, unremarkable, utterly indifferent. No footprints mark its surface, no smoke rises from nearby, no voices drift on the wind. The shore offers no welcome. It simply allows you to exist on it. You sink down, near the tide line, lowering yourself onto sand, still cool from the receding water. The grains cling to your palms, your legs, the fabric of your cloak. You run your fingers through them and feel their texture. Coarse, gritty, reassuring in its plainness. This is not the warm, bustling harbour you once knew. It is a place untouched by intention, shaped only by wind and tide. The surf rolls in beside you, its foamy edges reaching toward your feet, with the same steady rhythm that carried you here. There is no warmth in the gesture, no relief. The water washes over your skin with indifferent ease, as though greeting not you specifically, but the simple presence of another body arriving at its edge. You let it lap against your ankles, the coolness climbing slowly across your skin. Your breathing steadies. The silence stretches, thick and unbroken. You listen to the slow, measured collapse of waves along the shore, each one meeting the sand with a soft sigh before retreating. It sounds like repetition, made holy through persistence. You glance back at the ship, tilted slightly to one side, resting half buried in the shallow water. It looks exhausted, its mast leaning forward, its sail hanging limp, its hull mottled by salt and weather. You know it has carried you farther than its builders ever intended. You feel a muted gratitude toward it, though gratitude feels too strong a word for the quiet acknowledgement you can manage. Turning back to the beach, you study the line where sand meets earth. The land rises in uneven ridges, the ground marked by scattered stones and low shrubs, twisted by wind. There is no sign of habitation. No huts, no paths, no smoke. Nothing to suggest that another human presence has touched this place in years, perhaps longer. You push your fingers into the sand again, grounding yourself in its solidity. Your body aches, not with the sharp discomfort of immediate pain, but with the long, dull fatigue of someone who has travelled too far on too little. Each breath stretches thin inside your ribs. Each movement feels like a negotiation between your mind and your failing strength. The surf whispers beside you, its sound almost like breath, almost like thought. You close your eyes briefly, letting the rhythm settle into your bones. The sea has never offered comfort, but in its familiarity, you find something steadier than hope, a kind of resigned companionship. You open your eyes again. The beach remains unchanged, unmoved by your arrival. A gull calls overhead, its cry thin and disinterested. It circles once, twice, then glides out toward the open water again, as if confirming you have brought nothing of value for it. Your thoughts drift to home, not with longing, but with the faint ache of distance. You imagine the harbour now, with its crowded markets and layered scents. Shrinking slowly, as memory rubs its details thin. You picture the faces of the people you left behind, some fading at the edges, others lingering more stubbornly. The rituals, the routines, the noise, they all seem too far away to matter out here, where the world has reduced itself to sand, water, sky. The beach gives you no sense of arrival, no sense of rescue. It feels less like reaching safety and more like drifting into another chapter of the same indifferent story. You look at the waves tracing patterns along the shore, each one identical yet distinct in its small variations. They remind you of the days you spent drifting, each day resembling the last, each moment repeating itself in softer, worn-down echoes. You stand slowly, your legs tremble beneath your weight. The world tilts slightly, but the ground holds you. You take a few steps toward the line of shrubs, their leaves roughened by wind. Your feet press into the sand, leaving faint impressions behind. The prints look temporary, already softened at the edges by the faint breeze dragging across them. The island, or whatever this place might be, reveals no path, no direction. You take in the slopes rising farther inland, their tops dotted with jagged stones. There is no smoke curling from behind them, no movement among the shadows, no sign of life except the gulls overhead and the occasional crisp rustle of leaves. You return to the tide line, lowering yourself once more onto the sand. The water reaches for you again, brushing your feet with its cold, unchanging touch. You watch it withdraw, then return, then withdraw again. A simple rhythm, unconcerned with your presence. The quiet here is heavier than the quiet of the open sea. It carries no echo, no suggestion of things happening beyond your sight. It is the quiet of a place, untouched, unclaimed, unexpecting. You realize with a strange calm that this is not a sanctuary. It is simply the edge of land. Nothing more. You let your hands rest in the sand. Your fingers sift through grains, picking up small fragments of shell, tiny stones smoothed by years of tumbling water. These pieces feel older than any story you carry with you. A breeze moves across your face. The salt dried on your skin cools beneath it. You close your eyes once more, feeling the rise and fall of your breath. You do not know what this island holds. You do not know if it holds anything at all, but the fear you once had, the panic of drifting without direction, does not return. The shore does not welcome you. It does not reject you. It receives you the way it receives driftwood, broken nets, or bones washed in by storms. Not as a miracle, not as a tragedy, simply as another thing carried by the sea. You rest your head against your arm, the sand cradling you with its indifferent softness. The waves come and go, each one clearing a thin line of foam that dissolves almost instantly. You breathe with them, matching their rhythm without meaning to. The shore where no one waits has room for you, not out of kindness, but out of the simple fact that it has room for everything the sea leaves behind. You lie with your ear to the sand and feel the slow, patient rumble of the shore under your cheek. The grains press into the skin at the base of your skull, cool from morning and warmed in places where the sun has already decided to make a path. Your body settles into the curve of the beach as if it belongs there by some natural logic you had only just remembered. The ship behind you reclines toward the water like a tired thing finally permitted to rest. All around, the island keeps to its impartial business. Wind combing the shrubs, gulls arguing with the air, waves rehearsing their modest entrances and departures. Your name feels distant in your mouth, a syllable that used to sit ready and whole on the tip of your tongue. You try it once, vocalize it softly, and the sound seems foreign in the open air. It returns to you thin and unfamiliar, like an old coin never used. Names are useful where faces are many and memories are practiced. Here, they float free and easy as the shells under your palms. You begin to understand how quickly attention contracts when a person is removed from the tidy geometry of daily obligations. There is a quiet arithmetic to how people vanish from other lives. Letters stop arriving, if there were letters to begin with. Requests for grain delivery slacken. Someone else takes a corner by the hearth, and a speech that once occupied 2 breathless minutes now compresses into a single phrase. Your absence is folded into someone else's new routine, and the memory of you acquires the same domestic softness as an unused cloak. This is not malicious. It is simply the economy of being human. Attention is finite, and the world reallocates it without ceremony. You trace patterns in the sand with a fingertip, watching small ridges form and dissolve under the next arriving tide. Each line you make feels like a signature, written in a language the sea reads and forgets, in the same motion. You think about the little heirlooms people expect to mark them, amphorae stamped with a family mark, a carved token hidden beneath a floorboard, a single loaf set aside in expectation. These items promise continuity, but continuity depends on hands that remember and tell. Absent those hands, objects become archaeology almost at once. Your shipmates, if they still exist in memory as anything other than weather-worn silhouettes, likely reconstruct your story to be tidy. Stories are kinder when they end in a place that makes sense, a furnace work blamed for a misread map, a sudden squall, a noble sacrifice. The tidy story softens the edges of grief and allows the living to continue being useful to each other. You imagine their mouths shaping explanations that will make them feel safe again. Their descriptions of you will shrink to fit into the space available at the hearth. Perhaps they will remember a practical thing you did once, a clever knot, a joke about a lazy merchant, and repeat it like an offering that keeps you small and manageable. You press your palm flat into the sand, feeling the weight of granules and the odd warmth left from a sun earlier in the day. The physical imprint is immediate and honest. It does not flatter or forgive. It records the fact of presence, and then, with the passing of a few waves, fades. The thought curiously comforts you. Your footprint's temporary stayfulness mirrors how life itself preserves you, briefly visible, then dispersed. There is a certain fairness in the symmetry. You think of the clay amphorae stacked by your father's door, painted with looping marks that once meant everything. The paints have their own mercies. They flake, they fade. They become interesting to someone who reads antiquity in terms of colour palettes. Your name might end up as a line on a ledger, a note in the margin of someone's account. Sailed, presumed lost. It reads like an administrative convenience. It will make a clerk's work more efficient. It will not hurt. This is the modern kindness of forgetting. Practical, tidy, and unbothered. The island offers no message about your importance. It folds you into its topology as if you were a pebble. Shrubs close over the suggestion of a path. A gull settles on a nearby stone and preens, uninterested in your history. Even the wind seems practiced in indifference. It carries your hair across your face, cleanses the salt from your skin, and moves on. There is no state to petition here for attention. There are only the small certainties the island provides. Water, shade where leaves make it, and stones to lean against when your legs tremble. You let the realization of anonymity settle into you like an old coat. It is not humiliation. It is a pragmatic fact that frees certain kinds of thought. Freed from the expectation of an audience, you can notice smaller truths. How sand compresses under weight, how the sun finds a way into the corners between ribs and deck, how the sound of your own voice seems less urgent when it has no one to answer. You discover a private life beneath public roles, one that does not require witnesses. It feels strange and at times oddly tender. Occasionally you find humour in the absurdity of what matters and what does not. You imagine the villagers' debates, who will inherit whose goat, which family will take which strip of terrace land, concluded faster in your absence. The petty domestic squabbles that seemed so tedious before now look almost necessary for the species. They keep the world turning in small increments. Without them, the vastness looms bigger, and the mind finds an appetite for different, harder thoughts. You watch a crab cross the tide line, its movements deliberate and oddly dignified for something so small. It pays no mind to your history. It lives by its own edges. You feel a kinship with its narrow focus, survival, navigation of immediate space, the economy of minute choices. The metaphor comforts without flattering. You are not required to be remembered in grand terms. You need only learn to attend to the small, practical things that keep a body alive for another day. Evenings here are quieter than you expected. The sun collapses into a colour you did not know a sky could hold, and the temperature drops with economical speed. You fold your cloak again and watch your breath make small ghosts in the cooling air. Stars emerge thin and indifferent. The island's silence grows not in hostility but in the natural simplification of a place that never had many stories to begin with. When you think of legacy, you find your mind returning to small acts rather than monuments. A goodly repaired sail, a knot that held the precise way you salted a wound. These are the details that once made you useful. They are the fragments that will live on in other hands, not as your biography, but as practice. Perhaps that is enough. Perhaps being useful in the way a rope is useful counts for more than being sung about by generations who would misunderstand you anyway. Night comes and you lie back, letting the sand cradle you. The dark is complete and not unkind. It presses gently, softening the world until faces blur into general shapes. Names lose their heft and become small tools, useful when required, otherwise silent. The sky above seems less like a place for destinies and more like a blanket for attention. You can see how narratives are made. People gathered around hearths, speaking, deciding which fragments to hold and which to let go. You would be a fragment elsewhere. Here you are, just a body under stars. You do not feel erased, rather you feel simplified. Removed from obligations and from the constant need for explanation, your life narrows into essentials. Breath, bone, water, the simple economy of turning over when stiff. There is a clarity in that narrowing that almost feels like a private mercy. The torrent of concern that once flooded your days, plans, favours owed, expectations, falls away into a simpler weather. There is a relief in being unremarkable. There will be no songs carved in palace walls for you. There will be no elaborate tomb and no procession of mourners on the quay. That would be extravagant and unnecessary. People who remain behind must rearrange life for the living, and that takes the shape of usefulness. Your absence will be stitched into someone else's schedule. Your story will be told briefly at best, then set down like a tool returned to a shelf. You turn your face to the sea and consider the smallness of these conclusions. There is a faint irony in feeling comforted by anonymity, yet here you are, comforted. The island has no interest in making you an example. Its indifference is a clean thing, free from both cruelty and consolation. You lie under it, perfectly ordinary, and the world carries on. You sleep then, not with the frantic hope of returning to some remembered place, but with the soft acceptance of a person who has learned how little the world requires of any single life. The tide will shift, the gulls will argue, the scrub will keep its quiet rituals. Lives will fold in and out of notice, like sunlight across sand. You rest, and in that rest you discover an odd sort of peace, one shaped not by fame or memory, but by the modest, durable fact of existing for a little while. The world greets the morning slowly, as though even the sun has decided to rise with deliberate restraint. Light edges over the horizon, brushing the tops of the shrubs with a faint gold that feels more like a suggestion than a promise. You lie where the sand has formed a shallow cradle beneath you, your limbs resting in a posture shaped less by choice than by the natural easing of a tired body. The faint coolness of dawn touches your skin, loosening the last fragments of night that linger at the edges of your thoughts. You tilt your head toward the shoreline. The sea breathes in long, measured waves, each one slipping onto the sand with a soft collapse, before retreating again into its enormous quiet. The rhythm is steady, unhurried, familiar. The same cadence that carried you across days and nights when direction had ceased to matter. It moves with the indifferent grace of something too old to care and too patient to avoid caring entirely. You watch the water rise and fall, and something in you shifts in response. Not sharply, not dramatically. It feels more like a long-held breath finally taken in its full measure. The tension that clung to your ribs loosens. Your fingers uncurl slightly. Even the ache lodged behind your sternum seems to dissolve into the sand beneath you. The sea continues its ancient breathing, and you begin to understand the shape of the lesson it has been offering all along. You push one hand into the sand, feeling its warmth returning as the sun climbs higher. The grains cling lightly to your skin, marking you without claiming you. You sit slowly, your body adjusting with the careful movements of someone who has learned that nothing, not even rising, is to be taken for granted. The air carries a faint sweetness from the inland shrubs, mingling with the salt that has become part of your breath. The thought arrives gently, without ceremony. You have survived long enough to feel something that resembles peace. Not the peace sold by temples and poets, those polished ideas of triumph, redemption, or divine favour. This is a quieter thing, almost austere in its simplicity. It does not celebrate survival, it merely accepts it. The sea's patient rhythm seems to meet this realization with an unspoken acknowledgement, as if saying you have finally reached the part of the journey where understanding matters more than arrival. You stand carefully, your legs trembling under your weight. The world wavers for an instant, the horizon tilting slightly before steadying. You take a few steps to the tide line, letting the cool water wash over your feet. Its touch is neither welcome nor unwelcome. It simply exists, the way truth exists, regardless of belief. You look out across the expanse, the water shimmering now with the clarity of a day newly born. The sea appears softer from this vantage, but you know better. Its calmness is not gentleness. It is merely the absence of turbulence. The vastness remains even when it lies quiet upon the surface, yet standing here, with the land beneath your feet and your breath steady, the vastness feels less like a threat and more like an honest acknowledgement of your small place in the world. A wave rolls toward you. It breaks gently against your ankles, then withdraws with the faint pull of sand shifting under your heels. You feel the rhythm enter your body in a way that seems almost natural now. The sea has taken from you direction, certainty, hunger's comfort, the illusion of control, but what it gives in return is subtler, something like the dignity of clarity. You tilt your face to the breeze. Its coolness carries the faint scent of the open water, a reminder of the distance you travelled without meaning to. You inhale it, not to remember, but to acknowledge that the journey has settled into something different now. You are no longer drifting, you are simply present. The sand beneath your feet warms slowly as the sun rises. You step back a little, finding a patch where the warmth gathers in thin, pleasant pockets. You lower yourself once more to the ground, sitting cross-legged, palms resting on your thighs. Your breath moves in and out with quiet regularity. You feel the weight of your body without resenting it. You feel the weakness in your limbs without fearing it. There is a strange completeness in this stillness. You think of your name again, but with less urgency than before. It comes to you like a distant melody, recognizable, but no longer carrying the weight of expectation. The world does not require you to be anyone specific here. It makes no demands, holds no ledger of your deeds or failures. The shore asks nothing. The sea offers nothing. Yet both acknowledge your presence simply because you exist within their boundaries. A small stone sits near your knee, half buried in sand. You pick it up, feeling its cool surface against your palm. It fits neatly into the curve of your fingers, shaped by time into a softened form without edges. You turn it over once, twice, then set it gently back where you found it. The act feels significant in a quiet way, as though recognizing the stone's right to be undisturbed is a kind of respect you needed to learn. You watch a line of foam slide along the shore, the white, curling edges dissolving before your eyes. The momentary beauty of it surprises you, not because it's remarkable, but because it's so brief. A wave like a life appears, expands, disappears. No ceremony, no explanation. Its existence is its meaning. You draw your knees closer, resting your chin atop them. The wind moves through the shrubs with a soft rustling that sounds almost like a voice, one that speaks without asserting anything. You listen though you know it is only the wind. The stillness within you makes room for such illusions without needing to believe in them. Your thoughts drift to the villagers again, but this time without the ache of distance. You imagine them going about their work, their days folding into one another as predictably as the tide. Their lives continue not because your absence has been repaired, but because life continues regardless. This knowledge does not diminish you. Instead, it frees you from the burden of imagining yourself central to anyone's world. You run a hand across the sand beside you, letting the grains slip through your fingers. The feeling is gentle, unhurried. You realize you no longer measure moments by urgency, by progress, by survival. You measure them by presence. Your body, the sand, the sea, the breath moving in and out without strain. The peace that surrounds you is subtle. It does not envelop you all at once. It accumulates slowly, the way driftwood gathers at the edge of the tide. A small acceptance settles into your bones. Not a surrender of life, but a surrender of struggle. The fruitless resistance against forces too large to sway. You turn your gaze once more to the sea. It stretches wide and patient, exhaling against the shore with its ageless rhythm. Its movement is not triumph nor defeat. It is simply existence, repeated with the same steady honesty that shapes stones, wears cliffs, and carries driftwood across impossible distances. You understand now that your wandering did not end here because you survived. It ended because the world, indifferent as it is, follows its own patterns, and you have learned to breathe within them. You lie back in the sand, feeling its warmth gather beneath your spine. The sky arches above you, clean and bright. Your breath finds its own rhythm, aligned with the sea's measured exhale. You close your eyes, not from weariness, but from the quiet certainty that nothing more is required of you in this moment. A life, like a wave, arrives, forms, dissolves. Brief, quiet, enough. The sea breathes, you breathe, and for the first time, both feel like the same thing. And that brings us to the end of tonight's story. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with another forgotten corner of history you'd like explored next. If you'd like early access to more of these quiet descents into forgotten history, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps more people find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S., Rich Davis, and Leslie Schofield. Sleep well.